On the way home, would like to acknowledge the original stewards of whose lands this podcast is recorded on. In York Region, we recognize we're on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, and that this is the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit. In Vancouver, we acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, whose presence on these lands continue to this day.
Welcome back to another episode of On the Way Home. I'm your host, Michael Braithwaite from Blue Door. This podcast is brought to you by the good folks at Blue Door, who are providing services to people in York Region, Peel Region, and Durham Region with housing, homelessness, and employment services, many vulnerable people all the time. And in partnership with the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. If you don't know about the Canadian Alliance, they run all sorts of different campaigns to support our most vulnerable across the country. Plus, they do a lot of training too. To check out all their work, go to www.caeh.ca. My kids say you don't have to say the www before each time, but listen, I'm old and I'm going to stick with what works. We have a great guest today, and we'll get to that guest in just a minute. There's lots happening across the country right now in the area of housing, homelessness, health, and employment, all the different pieces we talk about. Just recently in Ontario, the Ontario Superior Court, there's a challenge in Waterloo about clearing an encampment, and that judge actually ruled that you couldn't clear the encampment. And listen, this is not the exact ruling, but unless there was ample space for people to go to inside the emergency housing system. And that certainly wasn't the case in Waterloo. And it wasn't just about enough spots, but enough spots that were needed, whether you needed a spot in a family shelter, youth shelter, senior shelter, women escaping violence, that kind of thing. So that is a huge ruling. And I think people are pretty excited about that. But there is a flip side to that too. So I just want to tell you, we're going to have a podcast around that with Lilani Farha and Caitlin Schwan, just talking about that ruling, all about it, the good things and some of the concerns too that we still have to work through. So always big things happening in the sector across the country. We know that Canada wants to build, I think it's 3 million homes by 2030 if they're to cut chronic homelessness in half, which is their goal by 2030. And in Ontario right now, the province is pushing to build 150,000 homes a year. Currently, I think we build less than 100,000. So lots of work to do and lots of controversy around how that is being done. But this podcast is all about bringing together folks who talk about the challenges to this work, but also the solutions, what's happening. And quite often when we have those conversations, more often than not, we don't have the voices of people with lived experience, or what we call lived experts, to weigh in and say, hey, this isn't what what I think we should do. This is what we should do. And I know that because I've been through that experience. I can share that experience with you. So today, our guest, Earl Thiessen, really is someone who has that lived experience and now is the executive director for Oxford House Foundation of Canada, right? Doing incredible work there. And he's going to tell us all about it, but he's also going to share his story, which, we talked just briefly before this, Earl and I, we're talking about the courage it takes to do that. I think listeners, not only, when they're sharing their story and it's powerful and it helps for understanding, and sometimes it also, for people, they look at someone like Earl and say, hey, he knows, he's been there, he knows what he's talking about. I could push through too, right? But it also can be extremely traumatizing for people to retell their story time and time again. So it's important that they have a good support system around them and coping skills, which Earl has said he absolutely does. So I want to welcome our guest. Earl, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Well, Earl, we start the show every time with the same first question because it's a little bit different for everyone. There's similar themes, but it's a very personal question, and that is, what does home mean to you?
Home for me is all about safety now and comfort, right? It's and that's just like our name is the Oxford House Foundation of Canada, but we provide safe recovery homes for people. It's all about safety for me and belonging and feeling comfortable.
Yeah, that's huge, right? I mean, so many people, that comfort level, that safety level, they don't have it because they're either on the street or staying in housing that is precarious, where one day from the next they don't know if their safety is at risk or if they're not going to have a home to go to the next day.
Well, that's just it. I missed security there because that is a huge piece. As we know, people, rotating in and out of housing, you feel a little more secure when it's your home, right? And it gives you that space where you can look at yourself and see possibly areas that you want to work on.
Interesting enough, Earl, we were our in our region, they're trying to build a new men's emergency and transitional housing um, project. We have one right now. It's just at the end of its life. It's really old and not in great shape, and they're putting it in another area. And where the residents were saying, of course, the NIMBYism popped up.
Mhm.
We like the idea, just not here, right? And one of the things I said, listen, our guys don't want to be here either. It's not that they don't, but they don't have a choice. Emergency housing is never
Yeah.
usually anyone's first choice. They'd rather have a key to their own front door where they can have total control over guests coming in, their own safety, have that security you talk about. So they don't want to be there either. But unfortunately, until we get enough of supportive housing with the wraparounds, this is the reality. This has to be there. So yeah, security is huge. Now, I want to hear. I've read about it. I've done a lot of reading around because you've been very generous in sharing your story. But can you talk a little bit about your journey for our listeners?
Yeah, 100%. It's, I mean, not to start from the beginning, but when I was young, there was being Indigenous and not really identifying as Indigenous. There was a lot of shame when we were young, and this stems from my mom, the intergenerational trauma. Right, my mom didn't identify as Indigenous either, and she was straight from the reserve. So there's a lot of childhood trauma that happened and happens, and by no means would I put blame on the generation then of parents. It was a different time and a different lifestyle, and they grew up different, just like we're growing up different now, and my kids are growing up different. But at some point, the cycle needs to stop. I was pretty active when I was young. A lot of sports. We were always outside of the house, right? It wasn't like now where electronics are taking over children's lives, but we were outside a lot, and that's actually probably was good and bad because I was in situations where I didn't have any guidance or any peers around me. It was people just like me. And the first time I got blackout drunk, I was 12 years old, right? And my daughter's 12 right now, and I couldn't even imagine or fathom the idea of her drinking like that, let alone drink. So, and that just goes with the times. But there was a lot of partying in my house, my parents' house. A lot of drinking, alcohol ran free, the fights, the arguments. A lot of that people don't realize the effect that has on children later in life, right? Being spanked, that I'm not saying that I haven't spanked my kids, because I have with my hand. I would never think of hitting my kids with a belt or a metal ladle, which I don't want to say it was normal, but that was a lot of the way that it happened when we were kids. And now you look at people from my generation and the generation right after. There's a lot of childhood trauma from those instances, right? I think a lot of that led to me being unable to cope with those issues, and then as a young man, a year older than when I started drinking, I had experienced sexual abuse from an older gentleman at a house when we were drinking, and I blacked out, and that's when the sexual abuse happened. But I didn't talk about it. I held that in for 24 years, almost a quarter century. I didn't speak about it. The shame, there's a lot of shame associated with that. But after that incident, I was all about masking the pain. I call it unable to deal with the emotional response of the trauma. But that it just escalated from there, right? The drinking, the drugging, just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I wasn't a social drinker. I couldn't have a couple. I drank until I was blacked out, until I was numb, which is the case a lot with a lot of people now. And I mean, I don't mean to speak in general terms about everybody, but in my 13 years at Oxford House and my 7 years on the street, I've had a lot of discussions with people, and I would say 95% of those people identified childhood trauma, whether it's physical, sexual, mental, emotional, spiritual abuse, and I spiritual trauma, I should say, because it wasn't until I connected with my Indigenous culture that I actually started healing. It's been a lot of work and soul searching and putting myself out there and making myself vulnerable. And not that there's any difference between genders, but there's an image that men think they have to portray and not speak about things like that. And that's where we just get carried away with the drugs and alcohol to try and mask the pain.
The trauma, as you talk about, we've had Tom Walker on here, who's a trauma specialist, and he said exactly what you're talking about. He said so many people don't even know their what their trauma is, and it can be triggers. He said, someone could come in the room and whoever maybe abused them had a beard, and that you walk in the room and that triggers the trauma, and they're 2 stages back. The addictions take over, that kind of thing. Let's talk about some of the keys to recovery for you. 7 years on the street, tough times. What were some of the keys to your recovery to push you through?
A lot of it was one, being honest and basically surrendering and putting all my safeguards and my walls down. That was the first step. I mean, once I ended up on the street, it was trauma compounded, right? There was so much happening, so much that I witnessed. But it wasn't until in 2007, when my partner then was murdered on the street, part of a stabbing spree in Calgary during the stampede, that her life was taken, that I really didn't look at what I was doing, what the effect that my addiction, my homelessness, my trauma actually had on other people, right? My parents were terrified. My mom even told me before she passed away, she said that every time that there was a story on the news about a homeless person freezing to death, that right away the panic set in. And then I remember again, my parents saying to me, because I did see them when I was on the street, they did come visit. They didn't give up on me, but they did say that the one thing that we want to see before we leave this earth is to see you get your life together. And my mom got that. I spoke about it at when I was giving her eulogy at her funeral, and I said, Mom got her wish. She got to see her son clean and sober and succeeding in life. Sorry. And that means a lot to me. And that's what I was thinking about. I was in the drunk tank, 11 warrants, thinking that this was it. I was going to jail, and then I kept thinking, this isn't why this isn't why the Creator put me on Mother Earth, was to die a homeless man. That kept running through my head, and then I kept seeing an image, because in Calgary, and it's probably pretty similar across the country, when a homeless person passes away, there's posters up on the shelter doors and everything saying memorial for so and so. And I had a visual that had that poster up that said memorial for Earl Thiessen, and I was defeated. And I went in front of the JP. This was the small window, and it's kind of hurtful saying it, but it's those small windows where people change their lives, the small windows of opportunity that we give and that are given to us, that help people just like me walk through those doors and change their lives. But I talked to the JP, and he said I had 11 warrants, asked me if I had anything to say for myself, and I said yes. I need help dealing with the murder of my partner and dealing with my addictions and my trauma. And he asked her name, and I told him Jackie Crazy Bull. And he had heard about the murder up in Edmonton, which is where he was, over the intercom. And he gave me his condolences, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to release you on your own recognizance, which never happened before, right? They always $1,000, $2,000 bail, and I go in. So when he said that, he said, I want you to go get the help you need, and I want you to clean up these criminal charges. So that morning at about 6:30, I limped up. November 13th, 2007. I had limped up to Renfrew Recovery Center and had gotten in. When I say limped up, it's because I had gotten beaten up by the police, and they had broken my toes and really lumped me up all over the place. My eye was shut. But I'd limped up to Renfrew Recovery Center on November 13th, 2007, and I've been clean ever since. And then I started looking at myself. I knew I had to heal. I knew I had to speak about my trauma. That was the key, the absolute key for me to start my healing journey. I'm still healing. It doesn't stop, right? But that was the key, was for me to speak about my trauma. So, and here's an interesting story. I had gotten into detox, and I had a treatment date for January. This is in November. My treatment date's in January. Right away, I started freaking out. I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to end up back on the streets. Am I going to live? Am I going to OD? Am I going to, go to jail? Am I going to miss my treatment? Everything just started setting in, the initial panic. So, and that's where one of our housing models I developed for the organization was from that experience. But I had called a lady I knew at Alpha House. She worked at Sunrise Healing Lodge and at the Alpha House Society, which is a medical detox and shelter in talks for the homeless. But I had called her, and she said, Earl, give me a bit of time here. Let me figure something out. And she had called a couple hours later and said, I've got you your treatment date in 5 days at Sunrise. And that was my second window of opportunity that came by reaching out and asking for help. And then I went into Sunrise, which has the spiritual focus, the Indigenous focus for spiritual healing. And I reconnected with my roots, and I started my healing journey.
Wow. An incredible story, Earl. Thank you so much for your courage to share. How much, I would ask to you, touched a little bit on this. You said, you've used your experience and what you do now as executive director of Oxford House. How much does your lived experience play in your day-to-day work that you do?
It's my best education, right? You can't nothing against formal education. You can't go to university or college and get what a person like me has. And I'm not unique. My story isn't unique, and I say that repeatedly. There are many people out there like me, and I didn't get to where I am by myself. It took a lot of support along the way. A lot of members and employees of Oxford House have been a part of that journey. My family, my extended family, a lot of people have shown me the understanding and have supported me. So, for me, I just can't believe 16 years ago I was sleeping under a bridge, in the middle of winter. I spent a whole winter outside. Woke up many times not feeling my toes or my fingers and going, uh-oh. And then thankfully it came back. But I just, gifts of recovery, I say. This is why I am where I am. Somebody saw the founder of Oxford House. When I moved into an Oxford House, the house was a bit of a disaster. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't being run properly. And that comes on not just the organization, but the support worker and the residents. There's a level of accountability you have to have for yourself and for other people. When you're recovering, it's not easy, right? So, and I changed the way that house operated, the way the house looked, the people that were in there, and the founder of the Oxford House Foundation, Ron McMillan, saw something in me that I didn't see. And he had actually talked to my wife, Karina. She was in an Oxford House at the time, and he asked her, "Do you think Earl would be interested in working with us?" And she said, "I can ask him." And she relayed that message to me, and I called Ron and went through the interview process, and here I sit. And that's just by him having faith in. I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm here, right? And to be able to help so many people develop these housing models that haven't been developed, and that it puzzles me. I think the lived experience piece and putting in the safeguards for the security of the home is what made the big difference, right? We just did a huge announcement here Friday with the government of Alberta supporting our pre-treatment homes, which is I don't think it's a new concept, but the Oxford House pre-treatment housing model, it's a one of a kind, right? It's I'm sure there's people out there that have similar housing models, but not like this one. And that's because it was developed through lived experience, maybe a little bit of fear from when I was sitting in detox, wondering where I was going to go, and that I just it's not for us. People goes, well, would you share that model? Of course I would. Why wouldn't I? It's not, that would be pretty selfish of me not to share that with people, say in Ontario or in the States or anywhere across the world. It's for people wanting recovery. It's not for me. That would be selfish.
Well, and absolutely, we're going to ask you about that. I think we see that day in, day out when we have that gap that you talked about, where people are feeling what you felt. I don't know if I'm going to make it. If treatment doesn't open up, if it's a couple months away, I'm minutes away from relapse. Like, I need it now. So that is wonderful. Hey, I know Oxford House is a lot of stuff. Tell us a little bit about Oxford House. What does it do? What is it? What is its purpose? What are its services?
Yep, no, 100%. Oxford House started in 1995, so we've been around for a long time. It's peer supported recovery housing is what it is, and I emphasize the peer support because when you're recovering with like-minded individuals, it just makes it more, I don't want to say comfortable, but comfortable. You can be sitting in the living room and starting to experience certain things, and you need that release to speak about. You just turn to your roommate, right? That was huge for me. But Oxford House is peer supported recovery housing. We have with a high level of accountability for people, right? You have to want to be, you have to have that want to change your life to really fully benefit from what we do, because we have a lot of services that we are connected to: employment and education, volunteering, but it's a structured environment, right? The homes are 5 people for the most part. Everybody in the home has a role. There's a president, a secretary, a treasurer, chore coordinator, and a safety supervisor. Everybody is accountable not only for themselves but to their housemates. Right? Everybody in the house has a chore. The houses take care of themselves as a little family. But and then we evolved as time went on. Right? The first model that I developed was we call entry-level housing, which is for the chronically homeless and institutionalized. It's a longer period of time for you to get active and get those resources, right? We partner with Prospect out here in Calgary, and that's where people go to get their resume writing skills, their interview skills, entryway into education if they need to maybe do some upgrading. We're connected with so many colleges, AJ Academy, Bow Valley, Louis Riel. There's so many that we're connected to, that it's really easy to get them I shouldn't say easy. It's easy to set them on the path. And again, we don't do the work for the residents. We open up the doors, they do the work. There's a level of accountability with Oxford House, and that's I don't think the residents see it right away, but that all has to do with building self-efficacy for them, right? To build up their self-esteem, their self-worth. You come into an Oxford House after being chronically homeless or doing a long stretch of time in and out, you don't know where to begin. And that's actually where the model was developed. I was speaking to a resident that was leaving, and I asked him where he was going, right? I said, "Did you have a slip?" And he said, "No, the guys in the house asked me to leave." Because they can, after you get a disruptive behavior for not being productive in the home. And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Earl, I don't, because, they said because I'm not active, I'm not looking for work, I'm not going to school, I'm not doing anything." And he said, I'm ashamed, I'm embarrassed. I don't know how to write a resume, right? I don't know how to do a job interview. I don't know how to dress. So I'll just go back to the streets. I said, "No, you won't. You'll go back into the house. And we'll figure this out." And that was where the model was developed. Again, lived experience, right? And then we also it started off as a collaboration, but now it's just Oxford House running the whole housing model. Our Indigenous, peer, and culturally supported recovery housing, right, for men and women. We call them healing homes, because that's exactly what they are, right? It's a safe place for our people, our Indigenous population, to come together. It doesn't matter your cultural setting, creed, NA, Blackfoot. You all come together, and you as we say, we share your experience, strength, and hope with each other, and you heal together, and you grow as a family. And we do ceremonies, sweat lodges, sharing circles, healing circles, elder sharing circles. You're allowed to smudge in the house. We provide that cultural support, again, through the government of Alberta with the funding through them. And then we have our pre-treatment housing model that was developed. It was years ago, but and it was a lot of work. There was people are going, "How do you put 5 people fresh out of detox into a house and expect success?" And that's not the way I developed the model, right? I knew that would be a disaster. So I implemented what we call a house lead, which is a person that has, I would say, midterm sobriety, that's been in an Oxford House for at least half a year. We offer them the position as a house lead to come in and help guide people on their journeys. That was a safeguard when we started. We still have the house leads, but now with the funding from the government of Alberta, we removed the barrier of cost. There is no cost to pre-treatment housing. We doubled the size. We now have 20 beds. We have addiction counselors for the men's homes, for the ladies' homes, that provide 1 hour of just beginner treatment, like relapse prevention, maybe some step one work if that's the route they want to go, self-esteem building, just to get them ready and get comfortable to take that next step in their life. So going into residential treatment isn't such a shock, which it is for a lot of people. So, and it's filling that gap between detox and residential treatment, because I'm pretty sure everywhere that offers residential treatment has a backlog, a wait list. And that's where this model comes into play and fills that void.
100%. And many times, sometimes you're looking out of province to get people in. And as you know, I mean, a lot of recovery is creating community. And so when we push people out of the communities they know, it can set them back as well. I have to tell you this. I want to talk a little bit about addiction. One of the most profound experiences of my life was going to a good buddy of mine had his 1 year of sobriety. So they brought him in and they invite family and friends. And man, I think everyone should go to see something like that, because you see that addiction doesn't just pick on the poor, or it doesn't just pick on, so you see everyone from all walks of life, where you saw 16-year-olds in there, and you saw people that are clearly experiencing homelessness. You saw extreme wealth of people that are in there, people from every religious background, indigenous, non-indigenous, like in that room. And you'd have someone go up there and say, I'm an alcoholic, I've been clean for 45 years, and they're speaking. And then people who are giving chips for a week or 24 hours. So it really opens your eyes and says, like, it happens, it can happen to all of us, and through different circumstances. What are, in your eyes, are the biggest misconceptions out there around addiction?
I think one of the biggest pieces is everyone thinks we're bad people, we're criminals, right? We're beyond help. Again, that comes down to choice, right? But there's stigma out there, and I'm one of the many people that want to break that, right? We've had I don't want to say any company names, but we've had executives in our homes, we've had oil rig workers, we've had city employees. It doesn't, we've had moms, dads that are still in their marriage that need to come out and take some of that time to heal away from the family. But stigma is really, really bad. If people, I wish I could speak to the whole world and show them that recovery is possible. My trauma, contributed to me becoming an addict, but that's not who I am. The person that you're speaking to now is who I am, right? And I've dedicated my life to helping other people just like me, and so have many others. I mean, the list goes on and on. And society in general just needs to take a look, because I'm dealing with. I can pretty much guarantee that every family out there throughout the family line at some point has somebody struggling with addiction, right? And we hide that because it's shameful. It's not shameful, right? It's a result of trauma. And people need to understand, right? I always say that for my beginning, people say rock bottom, but it was more of an awakening for me, right? And I always say by Jackie's life being so selfishly taken, it inadvertently helped save mine. And I honor her, my mom, all the people that we lose to addictions, mental health, homelessness. I honor all of them by doing what I do. And I will go to any means. It kind of drives my wife nuts because I'm always talking about recovery, and I get it because it's just what I do. It's my passion, and I have all types of, even outside of Oxford, I also have parents calling me about their kids and stuff, and I work with them because it takes 5 minutes of a person's life to stop, listen, and see what you can do to change that person's life. That's all it took for me. Was that JP giving me his condolences, saying, I'm going to release you on your own recognizance. Go get the help you need. Go get the help you want. Go clean up all your past, your criminal activity. It was that small window that changed my life, right? And then the one, of course, getting into treatment. but it's
Yeah.
society can't give up on society, or we're going to implode. And we're so, division is not good, right? It destroys lives, right? You can't, you have to be kind, you have to be caring, you have to ask questions, you have to say hello, you have to smile.
Yeah.
It's not a lie. A smile can change a person's day, right? And stopping to talk to a person. I always, when it comes, because I panhandled. I see the panhandlers. Uh, my wife too. She buys food, right? Gives them $2. Go get a coffee, right? For me myself, I don't give out more than $2 because I know, because of my lived experience, if I got a 20 and I was battling addiction, where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
So food is always the answer for us. $2 to get a coffee. And it was actually, I'll tell you a little story with my kids, and this is part of me breaking the cycle. When we're in the driving and we run across a homeless person, or a person holding the cardboard sign, I roll down my window. I give them my card. I don't say, you need to recover. That's not my approach. I say, here's my card. I've been where you are, right? When you're ready, call me. Throw my card in your backpack. When you're ready, give me a call. Here's $2. Go get a coffee, right? Stay warm, stay safe. And I drive away, and my kids are in the back seat. And then one time I was driving through, we were driving through and talked to a person, and or no, I drove by the guy. We waved, smiled, and drove by. And my kids said, Dad, well, how come you didn't stop? And I said, because I don't have $2. And they said, but you didn't stop and give him a card either. And that right there shows that my kids are paying attention to what's happening. And it doesn't have to be monetary value that you give somebody, right? That was a proud dad moment for me.
As it should be. Good for you. And you're right. It is that humanizing thing, that kindness too. I love what you're saying. We recently in York Region have gone through a bit of a NIMBYism thing where people are talking about us and them, and we're saying there is no us and them, there is us, and
Yes.
humans, and they're part of the community. Everyone's part of this community, not just who we choose. And so it's a tough run to help convince people. But it's interesting you say everyone's family. And in my family, I've got 3 siblings, and I have a sister who's been in and out of homelessness, has addictions, mental health issues. She's now 52, badly. It is tough. It is tough because her mental health challenges don't really allow her to get her diagnosis. So fights the help that she needs to do it, and it's just cyclical. So it is tough. You're right, and understanding that, and seeing why we use language like people experiencing homelessness, because we don't want you to see the addiction, we don't want you to see the homelessness, we don't want you to see the panhandling. We want you to see the human, and that JP saw the human in you and was human that day and said, "Hey, let's give a chance." I talked to about my friend who's now been 7 years clean. His ex-wife used to call me and say, "We need to do the intervention, we need to do this." And I would say to her, until you talk about accountability and doing the work, I said, until he's ready to do the work, until he tells me he wants that help, we can do everything we want, but it's not going to stick. He's got to. And eventually he got there. It was a painful process. And I just always would say to him, when you're ready, man, when you're ready, let's do it. I'm in 100%. And he always remembers that, because I think if I would have, he would have just pushed me away, right, when he wasn't ready.
Well, and then to have the services available, the right services, right? A good friend of mine, she's actually the CEO of the Calgary Homeless Foundation. It's not about the house. You have to have housing that's right for the person.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about the person being right for your housing. Patricia's a brilliant lady. I totally appreciate her, but that's stuck with me, right? Because I'm developing housing models, and that's to fit the person. You know what I mean? There's a big difference, and we know that all of us that are in this sector, we know that people are complex. There's and that's another reason why when it comes to mental health and addiction and medications, there are so many restrictions with treatment centers and housing providers. We were the first housing provider, and I can say this because I remember the discussion with Ron, the founder, God rest his soul, when I said we should try get somebody in here. She's on methadone. We should allow her in, and he said, "There's no way, that's a drug." And I said, "It's not really. It is a drug in the pharmaceutical sense, but this is helping her stay clean and sober off of her drug of choice, right?" And then we allowed Suboxone, and then we allowed Sublocade, Seroquel, which is a mental health. We opened up the door for people to understand that there are medications that actually do help people. There is a purpose for them, and it helps people get to that next step.
Well, it's harm reduction, right? I mean, you're saying, okay, like you're right. There's steps. The whole you got to break clean and do that will not work for everyone. That it just doesn't, or it forces people back out. So you have to have that flexibility. I want to ask you this last question. So the government of Alberta, they say, Earl, come on in. We're going to open up the vault. What do you do? What are your hopes and dreams? What would you do if money wasn't an issue? What can we do in this sector? What can you do at Oxford to really make a
man? I wish I would have peer supported recovery housing every corner of the province. Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Red Deer, Fort McMurray, and so on and so forth, all over. I would have recovery housing on First Nations land, right? Well, I mean, it's all First Nations land, but on our allotted plots. I would have just every model in groups of 4, right? Just like the medicine wheel. It's groups of 4 for everything. Have a staff, have the wraparound supports. And I mean, all that would take is probably about $50 million, and I could do that. Now, if Canada said that, that would be amazing, right? Because it is needed. I know there's a lot of private centers and everything out there, and they've got to do what they got to do. But if there was nonprofit housing in the States, there's over 2,000 Oxford homes. If I had 2,000, I don't even know if we could, 2,000 homes in Canada, we would make a massive dent in homelessness and addiction and mental health, right? And I'm all about partnering and collaborating with people. So you bring all the other organizations, there's a lot of us around, and you guys collaborate, get out of the silos, right? Where you're not holding on to your funding. If it's there, we all work together and we just come together and help people help themselves, is what I say, right? I totally believe in meeting people where they're at. I understand that, but let's not leave them there, right?
Absolutely. Well said. Listen, finally, if people want to find out more about the work you're doing at Oxford House, if they want to donate, if they know someone who needs help, where do they go?
To our website, oxfordhouse.ca gives you all the information you need. There's actually an application portal on there. There's a donation portal there. And as we all know, nonprofits, we really rely on donations. And I've worked with people across the country, right? I've helped set up recovery homes from Fredericton, New Brunswick to Victoria, and everywhere in between. And a lot of people just want to come together, but you can't do that without the funds, right? So donations are everything, and support. And we're here we have people coming from those reaches of Canada to Alberta to get the help they need, right? And now pre-treatment housing is free. There is no cost. You come in, your food is supplied, everything is supplied. You're getting some structure from our addictions counselors, and you're getting into treatment, right? It's a blessing for me it's a gift of recovery for me to even be sitting here talking with you, Michael. I mean, I shouldn't be. The cards were stacked against me 16 years ago until I faced myself, right? And it's just an honor to be here, and it's a real pleasure to know what Blue Door does and how you support our marginalized.
Well, thank you so much, Earl. Thanks for having the courage, sharing your story. Hey, as tough as it was, that was part of your journey. It got you to the place you're doing now, where you're making massive impact. You're changing and saving lives, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much to you and the team at Oxford House for all you do and for sharing your story and for coming on the podcast. So appreciated.
Of course. Thank you, Michael.
Man, what a great story. What a great guy too. And listen, he is just the nicest individual, and not just because he's on this podcast. Like from the minute I reached out to Earl to say we should chat, it's the most polite, upbeat, nice guy. When he said he feels like he's been given a second chance at life, he is living that and changing lives and really helping others and give it back. So cool. Check out Oxford House, oxfordhouse.ca. Be part of the solution. Give what you can. Be involved. If you or someone in your family needs help and you're in the Calgary area, please reach out to Earl and his team. Well, another great episode of On the Way Home, and I guarantee only one thing, we'll have another great one next week, and we'll see you then.